lovely day!
Hey, what's up everyone? It's Ryan here from The Y, and today we're gonna be taking a look at the 2015 film Mad Max Fury Road. Let me give you a quick fact right off the bat. Mad Max only had a total of 63 lines the entire film, and that's part of what makes it so great. No one watches a Mad Max film for the dialogue. We're all here for the post-apocalyptic visuals, the cars, and of course, the never-ending violence. And with the 2015 addition to the series, we got that in spades. So, without further ado, here it is, 30 facts you didn't know about Mad Max Fury Road. In the planning stages of Fury Road, George Miller noticed how many other post-apocalyptic movies went with a desaturated look. His thought was, if you're going to go with that, you might as well go all the way and make it black and white. That was his initial plan, but on second thought, he concluded the look is really only acceptable for art films. So instead, he went the complete opposite direction and cranked up the color and saturation, thereby differentiating his wasteland from anything we've seen before. A second key piece of the design of Fury Road can be found in this quote: "Even in the wasteland, people make beautiful things." Miller and the production team had the idea that just like our ancestors who created extravagant cave paintings, people living in a post-apocalyptic desert would also make their own unique aesthetics. Even though Mad Max Fury Road is set in a post-apocalyptic world, there are still many references to the old world that have survived all this time. During the scene where the bullet farmer is chasing down the war rig, he yells this. This is a callback to Heckler & Koch, a German defense manufacturing company that produces guns, just like the two MP5s that he's holding. The second clip is a bit difficult to hear.
I should be walking with the immortal, no feasting with the heroes of all time.
But of course, some form of McDonald's still exists in the wasteland. Because George Miller envisioned Mad Max Fury Road as a continuous chase with little to no dialogue, there wasn't much need for a screenplay like most traditional films. Thus, the storyboard was created even before the script and was made up of over 3,500 panels, which they used in filming the actual movie.
More like putting together a comic, and how do you tell that story?
It's a rare sight to see a character steal the show without saying a single word, but that's exactly what Coma the Doof Warrior accomplished in Fury Road. Sean Hape, the musician who played the maniacal guitarist, said the instrument itself weighed a whopping 132 pounds and shot out real gas-powered flames, which he controlled using the whammy bar. His name comes from the phrase doof party, which is Australian slang for an outdoor rave. And George Miller was so enthralled with the character that he originally planned to create a comic detailing his origin story. It never came to be, but it goes something like this. Coma was blind from birth, and things get a little hectic, so he and his mother escape to a mining town. Being blind and vulnerable, the two of them descend to the one place where having no sight is a competitive advantage, the pitch-black mineshaft. There, in the darkness, they live off rodents and whatever water they can scrounge together. One day, as Immortan Joe and his war boys are out on a mission, they hear the sound of music echoing from the abandoned mineshaft. Joe sees the usefulness in Coma and takes him in to be his bugler, although his mother wasn't as lucky. But at least Immortan Joe was nice enough to give Coma a piece of his mother to remember her by, which is to say that he fashioned a mask from the skin of his screaming mother's face for Coma to wear into battle. As one might expect from a movie filmed in the Namibian desert, Charlize Theron got into a feud with Tom Hardy that left her scared shitless. It all started from the fact that Hardy was supposedly notorious for being late to shoots, and it got so bad that if something was scheduled in the morning, he literally wouldn't show up. So, one day, they make a special request that he show up at 8 o'clock sharp, and when 8 comes around, Charlize Theron is there right on time and gets into the war rig. 3 hours pass without her getting out of the truck, and finally, at 11, Tom Hardy shows up. After waiting for 3 hours inside the truck in full makeup, Theron rightly goes ballistic, saying, "Find the cunt $100,000 for every minute that he's held up this crew." Hearing this, Hardy aggressively charged up to her and almost threateningly said, "What'd you say to me?" And that was the turning point. As Theron felt so threatened, she requested a producer be with her at all times in case something happened. Nicholas Hoult, who played Nux, described the situation as being on your summer holidays and the adults in the front of the car are arguing. I think we can all relate to that one.
If you can't fix what's broken, you'll go insane.
In case you were wondering, the tattoo imprinted on Max's back reads as follows: Day 12,045, HT 10 hands, 180 pounds, no name, no lumps, no bumps, full life clear, 2 good eyes, no busted limbs, piss okay, genitals intact, multiple scars, heals fast, O negative, high octane universal donor, Lone Road Warrior rundown on the Powder Lakes V8, no guzzling, no supplies, isolate psychotic, keep muzzled. The war rig that Furiosa drives in the movie has a skeleton arm on the driver's side door where her missing left arm should be. Without a doubt, Mad Max Fury Road suffered from a by-the-book case of development hell. It all began in 1998 when George Miller was crossing an intersection in Los Angeles. He received a vision of one long continuous chase with the MacGuffin being human beings. A couple years later, things were falling into place and they were about ready to shoot with Mel Gibson reprising his role as Mad Max. Then 9/11 happened. The American dollar collapsed against the Australian dollar and the budget couldn't survive from there. Because the movie was basically dead in the water, Miller left for 3.5 years to go work on Happy Feet, which turned out to be a big success. Afterwards, Miller recommitted to Fury Road and realized he needed to find a new lead actor. Mel Gibson had been through his fair share of problems.
Go have something to eat! Hooray!
And coupled with the fact that he was now in his 50s, it just wasn't gonna work out. Miller's top 2 choices for Max, besides Tom Hardy, were Armie Hammer and Jeremy Renner, with Michael Fassbender, Joel Kinnaman, Heath Ledger, Eric Bana, and Eminem all being considered too at some stage of development. Thus, with Hardy cemented as the new Mad Max, the stage was set for a 2010 shoot in Broken Hill, Australia. However, 2 weeks away from the start date, Miller got the bad news that production was once again cancelled. During pre-production, the area of Broken Hill had seen so much rain that the whole desert began sprouting flowers, killing any chance they had of filming there. Not willing to give up, Miller ended up waiting a whole year to see if the area would dry up, and when it didn't, he settled on Namibia as it never rains there. So, almost 15 years after the idea was first conceived by Miller, production for Fury Road finally began. At the start of the movie, as Max runs away from the war boys, he goes through a pair of doors. Upon closer inspection, you can see from the Star of Life symbol on them that they're actually repurposed ambulance doors, which makes sense as he was coming out of the hospital wing containing the blood bank. Historically, most films and video in general are shot at an industry standard 24 frames per second. But George Miller, being George Miller, shot over half the movie at different frame rates depending on the scene in question. For high action sequences, like the one in the beginning of the film, he'd lower the frame rate drastically, giving it a much more chaotic and jerky feel.
I am the man who grabs the sun, riding to Valhalla!
Every part of the film that takes place at night was shot during the day. Instead of using the common method of underexposing day for night, they overexposed the camera by 2 stops or more and then recolored everything in post-production. The main reason they would go for overexposure as opposed to under in a situation like this is to retain as much detail as possible in the darker parts of the image. More specifically, in a shot like this, the details in the shadows are still mostly there, and it doesn't just clip to black. There were a couple Easter eggs hidden within the war rig that gave the vehicle more life. One such Easter egg was a pistol magazine that was attached to the dashboard of the vehicle, ensuring an easy reload if the situation called for it. Another hidden feature lies in its gas pedal, which is actually not a real gas pedal, but rather a Brannock device, a piece of equipment used to measure feet. And funny enough, in some ways, the Brannock device is a better gas pedal than the actual thing. That's because you can extend the tool all the way out to keep the pedal down, acting as a sort of medieval cruise control. I think we've all seen this phenomenon happen. A popular movie or show gets released, setting off a weird trend, ending in some obscure product coming back into the spotlight. Two recent examples I can think of off the top of my head is Ramadan from Parasite and chess sets from The Queen's Gambit. Believe it or not, Mad Max Fury Road also began a mini trend causing a massive increase in sales of a certain product. It was the silver food spray Color Mist, and after the release of the film, it immediately sold out from people wanting to coat their face like a war boy. The best part about all this are the pages of hilarious reviews that were posted in the aftermath of the film, and still to this day, totally dominate the Amazon page.
If I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die historic on the Fury Road.
During the scene in which Max and Furiosa fight each other, Max reloads the pistol with one hand and fires off 3 shots in succession to end the battle. It happens so quick, I'll slow it down and play it again. You can see that not only does he reload with one hand, he does so by snagging the rear sight on his boot, thereby racking the slide. And what makes this even cooler is that this exact technique is taught by firearm training instructors in the event that you can only reload with one hand. Miller explained how the inspiration for the chrome spray came from a documentary he saw about Cambodian soldiers who would strap little jaded deities to their mouths as they would run into battle. This inspired him to create a similar ritual for the war boys that would allow them to enter Valhalla all shiny and chrome. But Hugh Keys-Byrne, who played Immortan Joe, proposed a different idea, that the spray actually contained a highly euphoric drug. Logically speaking, it makes a lot of sense. If I'm going to be suiciding in battle, I probably don't want to be sober. And the idea is also supported by the Australian term chroming, which means the inhalation of volatile substances to get high.
Oh, look at them. So shiny, so chrome.
Mark Mangini, the sound designer, had an interesting take on the war rig and the movie in general. He said, "I had this notion that the truck itself was an allegory for Moby Dick. If you think about this a little bit, we saw Immortan Joe, the leader of the war party, as Captain Ahab. He's hellbent on killing the great white whale, the war rig. To make this personification into a reality, when the truck gets hit by harpoons, you hear whale groans. And during the final crash of the war rig, you hear the sound of whales and slowed down bear noises. Going off this, the sound team took their idea and applied it to other vehicles as well. One example being the buzzards, as they personified it with the sound of a swarm of bees. It's no surprise that tensions were high on the set, as production was a nightmare, but there was also love in the air as well. The desert of Namibia doesn't exactly scream romance, but for stunt doubles Dane Grant and Dana Porter, it's a place they'll never forget. Dane Grant was Tom Hardy's stuntman, while Dana Porter was Charlize Theron's stuntwoman, and they actually fell for each other during the fight sequence between Max and Furiosa. That's right, somewhere in between all the punches and wrestling, magic happened and the two have now been married since 2013. And that's not all. Actress Riley Keough, who played Joe's wife Capable, also found a husband during production in Australian stuntman Ben Smith Peterson. They only really started dating during reshoots in Australia, but I'm willing to count that as marriage number 2 that was made possible thanks to Mad Max Fury Road. One scene that left me scratching my head and wanting to find out more was the quick shot of the swamp people in the bogs. It turns out they are in fact called crow fishers, and as their name suggests, they fish for crows in the sky. Reports from test screenings say there were scenes showing this very practice, which consisted of kites to attract the crows and nets to finish the job. However, it didn't make the final cut. As far as their backstory is concerned, the crow fishers were reportedly leftovers from the Vuvulini system. Because no males were allowed in their matriarchal society, whenever one was born, they were banished from the green place and sent to the outer swamps. After the boys reached puberty, they would only be visited for sperm milking and the odd ritual of family, and this is how the crow fishers came to be. By living in the swamp, they learned to walk on stilts through the sludge and fish for crows in the sky. Definitely, one of the major aspects that made Fury Road such a standout film was the editing, and George Miller ended up hiring his wife, Margaret Sixel, for the job. Because if a guy did it, in Miller's own words, it would look like every other action movie, but maybe some part of Sixel wishes he did hire a guy. Because the process itself sounds absolutely grueling. It took her 3 months to watch all 480 hours of footage, and that's just viewing it. Who knows how long it took to actually edit the thing. On top of that, Sixel had the studio constantly breathing down her neck, pressuring her to keep the film under 100 minutes. At a certain point, she said, "Screw it, I'm just gonna make the film that me and my husband want to make."
And we decided we'll do what we think is the best thing to do.
And that decision ended up paying off big time, as she was awarded the Oscar for Best Editing. As the character of Nux becomes less indoctrinated into the cult of the V8, his body paint slowly fades away. Fans of the Mad Max trilogy with Mel Gibson would have surely noticed just how different Tom Hardy's take on the character was. Mel Gibson's Max was always stoic but well-spoken, while Tom Hardy seemed to change things up entirely and took Max in an almost animalistic direction. You might think that's just how Hardy interpreted the character, but in actuality, all the wild and feral behavior he displayed was written into the script, and that script was written with Mel Gibson in mind. The idea was that after decades of living alone in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, Max had gone a wee bit insane and lost what made him human. But the movie with Mel Gibson never materialized, and Hardy was left to pick up the pieces and play the damaged Max. Although if you really wanted to see Mel Gibson in Mad Max Fury Road, all you have to do is look up the deepfake video with him in it.
So we take the war rig and we charge it right through the middle of them.
Hugh Keys Byrne, who played Immortan Joe, also played Toe Cutter, the original villain in the first movie. Charlize Theron cut no corners in taking on the role of Furiosa, and actually shaved her own head for the role. Because of this, she had to wear a wig to play Anna in A Million Ways to Die in the West. Another aspect which differentiated Mad Max Fury Road from other films is that every shot was filmed center frame. The movie contained roughly 2,700 cuts. Breaking it down further, that's only about 2.5 seconds per shot. And of course, during high-paced scenes, the average shot length was much lower. So to ensure that your eyes were always focused on the action and not totally disoriented trying to follow along, Miller always framed all the important characters and actions in the very center of the screen. It's honestly so smart. By doing this, they were able to cram so much more action into a tighter space of time, as your eyes are able to process information much quicker if they don't have to constantly look around. Charlize Theron actually broke Tom Hardy's nose with an accidental elbow to the face. Although after hearing about this heated feud they had going on, I'm not totally sold it was 100% accidental. In Fury Road, the Warboy's praying gesture is made to resemble a V8 engine. This hand symbol is indicative of the religion at play at the Citadel, the cult of the V8. Although the cult of the V8 is never directly mentioned in the film, it's crystal clear that the Warboys worship V8 engines as a source of power, and more than that, a conduit between the Wasteland and Valhalla. While not driving on the Fury Road, the Warboys worship at the V8 altar, which contains all the personalized wheels of warriors past and present. And their dedication to the cult goes so far that many even partake in scarification of their body parts to resemble an engine or car parts. As Fury Road was the 4th film in the Mad Max series, there were a ton of references to the previous movies. So many that I can't go over all of them, so I've picked out a couple of my favorites. The jacket is identical to the one that Max wore in previous films.
That's my jacket. Sure.
The music box that Toast winds up looks to be the same one that Max gave the feral kid back in The Road Warrior. In case you were wondering what happened to the Gyro Captain from Mad Max Thunderdome, it seems we may have found him. Max in Fury Road and the Road Warrior has problems with misfiring shotguns. And finally, there's a brief callback to Toe Cutter's death in the 2015 film. In the film, the crosshair for the harpoon gun was actually a Mercedes-Benz hood ornament, showing that the people of Mad Max can find a suitable use for any piece of equipment. Director George Miller famously claimed that over 90% of the special effects were practical and not digital. He said, "This is a film that didn't defy the laws of physics. If you're going to go out into the desert and have two vehicles colliding, why do it artificially?" Also, you have to assume that Miller's use of so many practical effects led to the film's Oscar win for Best Production Design. If you were wondering why we haven't seen a sequel to the 2015 film after such a long time, it's because of pay disputes between Miller's production company and Warner Bros. Thankfully, that's all over now, and it looks like we have some new movies to look forward to. Coming first is the prequel Furiosa, which will star Anya Taylor-Joy as Furiosa, and it seems like Chris Hemsworth in the role of the Warlord Dementus, and Tom Burke as Immortan Joe. The film is set to span the course of 15 years, with the main plot being a war for power between Dementus and Immortan Joe. Furiosa is scheduled for release on May 24th, 2024, and will be arriving before Mad Max The Wasteland, the sequel to Fury Road. Nothing much is known about that, and it looks to be in pre-production, so it's still a while off. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave me some suggestions in the comments about what video you want to see next. Alright, till next time, have a great day everyone.